So one thing that I really enjoy, as I'm looking at different ways of, different lenses of looking at the world, different paradigms, kind of like what is truth, like that whole thing. I really like when there seems to be parallels between different paradigms. So they're completely separate, coming to the same conclusion. So my favorite recently is the idea that we are not our thoughts. So in psychology, this will pop up, if we have that negative inner critic that's just so toxic towards ourselves, and it's just going and it's going. And, you start off on this like healing journey and you're like, why am I so, why are my thoughts so bad? Why am I so bad? And then you realize like these are thinking patterns. You're like, why are my thinking patterns so bad? And it's like we identify with them on some level. Either that we are our thoughts or that we have these thoughts and we're responsible for them somehow. Instead of being fucking chill about it and going, oh man, okay, brain, okay, thoughts. A lot of our inner voice is that programming template from our parents. Our parents tell us things over and over and over and over again. They reflect back to us who they believe we are, and we internalize that. And then we become adults, and even if we cut our parents off and we're like, that's it, I'm done with these toxic people, we unintentionally, subconsciously, we bring that stuff along with us. And so it's like they're gone, but all of that stuff that they have been feeding us for, let's say, 18 years before we could get away, or however long it was, is there. There's a concept, the French have this really amazing phrase for it, and I forget what it is, but it's like the idea of intrusive thoughts. Like if you're standing at the edge of a building, like on the roof or something, and you look down, that sudden feeling of like, like that you want to jump. Like you're not suicidal, you don't actually really kind of want to jump, but just out of nowhere this thought comes in. And it just seems kind of like random, like, why do I feel like this, it's these intrusive thoughts. We don't necessarily take responsibility for them. I remember, like last month, my son said something to me about like, I don't understand, like, sometimes something's so cute, I just want to hurt it, and I remember feeling that way when I was a kid. And of course he's little, so he's trying to articulate that feeling, like you see a cute thing, you just kind of want to like, I just want to smush you so much, it's, and it's like a totally normal thing. And I don't know how long he was struggling with the idea that like, maybe there's something bad about me. Like, I was like, well, man, that's normal. We all have that, maybe not we all, but like it's super common. Lots of people, like there's literally even like a word for it. It's just like, but anyway, so when we take like this ownership, not just ownership, but just we identify with it. Like we don't take that moment to step back and go, yes, these thoughts are occurring, but like, that's not me. I'm not those thoughts. I'm experiencing those thoughts, but I'm not necessarily generating them. They're not me. They're not mine even, especially if you have parents that were non-optimal, unsafe, unhealthy, maybe abusive, but there's a parallel to this in the spiritual community. So if you talk to people about like, who we are, ourselves, like our true selves, in the spiritual community, they'll say things along the lines of like, you're not your thoughts, you're the person experiencing. Like who you truly are is the person experiencing the thoughts. And it's that same thing of like, yes, thoughts are occurring. We have this, mental experience. But who we are at our core, our soul, is not the thoughts, and not even necessarily the person thinking the thoughts. Like it's the soul is like something separate. So anyway, again, I was like an atheist for a decade, so I'm not telling nobody nothing. But I just really love that there's this parallel, when we are depressed or even angry, there's usually, I've noticed in myself and others, and actually I first realized it, I was talking to my dad, and he's the first person who really, like, was able to articulate this idea to me, which is that this, like, thought loop. He'd be in a thought loop, and it'd keep going and keep going and keep going. It would just ramp up and get, and then he would get angry or allow himself to express, his anger in not okay ways. But, the thought loops were there. And I realized, is that I, too, had that thought loop. Mine, for him, he expressed to me that a lot of his thought loops were around not being respected. Why aren't people respecting me? I should be more respected. And, like, so he would just, he'd run that shit, hamster wheel it, until he got himself real angry. For me, it was, why doesn't anyone listen to me? Why doesn't anyone listen to me? And so I would just, like, over and over again. And then I'd, cycle myself into feeling awful, doing things that I didn't necessarily, feel good about later. And it happens with depression also. You think the same things over and over again about being broken, being unworthy, not deserving good things. Coming from a paradigm, very black and white, this very strong duality paradigm, instead of maybe a growth learning paradigm or like a compassion paradigm. And we could even have like a compassion paradigm towards other people and then towards ourselves be like, you're so wrong, you're so bad. Why are you so broken? You'll never be better. You don't deserve good things, even if you desperately need and want them. A lot of people in the depression community will say something along the lines of like, your brain will lie to you. Don't listen to it. You're gonna have thoughts, and they're not gonna be true. And you gotta ignore it. You gotta recognize like, oh, my brain's lying to me. And it's true in the spiritualism community as well. Only they come at it from a different angle where they're saying like, oh, that's your ego, and your ego's trying to preserve its self-identity, and you gotta let that go for enlightenment. Now, again, totally not saying that's correct, but I super love when concepts like this like track across multiple ways of thinking, across multiple paradigms. To me that indicates that there's really something there to pay attention to. We are not our thoughts. Our thoughts aren't even necessarily ours. We don't have to give them credibility. I've talked about before in other videos and on the subreddit. If somebody's an unreliable narrator, like we don't need to take information from them. If it's accurate, we're going to get it another way, in a safer, healthier way, from a safer, healthier person. So, like, if you're dealing with an unreliable narrator, someone who's unsafe, you don't back up. You don't even need to deal with that. Like, just trust. Like, if that's something you need to hear, it'll come back around in a way that's like safe enough for you to hear. But we can be our own unreliable narrators to ourselves, especially if we've internalized things that other people have said to us when we were young, or in trusting relationships. It's hard. It's really hard, obviously not everybody, but most people are trying to do the right thing and live their lives and love the people they love. And then we're in the middle of like quarantine, which is like, I mean, okay, I understand that there are many people who are like, quarantine's done. I'm in like a version of quarantine light, but still being very particular about who I spend my time with, and who my son, let's say, is exposed to. And so even if you're not necessarily quote unquote quarantining, like a whole bunch of stuff shut down and we're not able to like, be social. I mean, we're literally being forced to live the most extreme versions of our immediate life, without the regular social outlets, without, I don't want to say escapism and distraction, but it's just it's become the focus is very narrowed to like the immediate life, your immediate people, and some people are in a bad situation, and some people it's just like, this is making it 5,000 times harder. But I just, in case people didn't know, I just wanted to say it's an option to like recognize that your thoughts are doing a thing and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. And you ain't gotta take it seriously. We get like so invested, like, this is true. Oh, I feel feelings, and it might not be. I mean, it might be, but stepping back emotionally, from our thoughts, like that's 10 out of 10. I super recommend that. There's when you reach this, like, it is possible to think dumb shit and to like, oh man, I'm thinking, that's some dumb shit, and you don't have to take ownership of it. You don't have to be like, oh, that's me. I'm thinking dumb shit. I'm bad. Like, we're like, oh, look at that, Me personally, I conceptualize a lot of my inner voice as kind of programming from my childhood, particularly from my dad, who was a very negative person, and there does seem to be a parallel, with unsafe people, both victims and abusers, having very negative judgmental outlooks. Abusers, I mean, they will like internalize it too, but a lot of it is outward. They are being negative and critical and judgmental outward. And, because they're trying to displace how they feel about themselves. And victims, they just turn it on themselves so hard. And I mean, I've been there. I feel like this is something that everybody who's kind of had that set of life experiences, struggles with at some point. But it is just an FYI, there comes a point when you can start to let that go. And I'm not saying it's like an overnight process. Like, again, people, we gotta be real about the healing process. That's at least a year, 2 years. I certainly didn't want to hear like, oh, take a year or two and, get yourself right. Like, it seems like so much time, and yet when you turn around, you're like, oh, where'd the time go? We really owe it to ourselves to take it, and eventually we will. Like, there's only so much you can do that to yourself, to ourselves. It's exhausting. I really love like getting older. Like, man, I'm almost 40 and I'm finally like, I'm tired. I'm tired of thinking those things. I'm tired of feeling that way. I'm tired of hating things about me. Like, I'm just, and let's just be chilling. Let's just be having a good time. Is this shift like an overnight shift? No. This progress is not, it's incremental. And it happens. You are the chicken and the egg. So by the time you get to the end, you've changed as you're changing yourself, so you don't ever really feel different. But when you look back, you're like, oh man, I remember that. I remember feeling that way. Man, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so what I wanted to do is, I haven't really done like a card thing in a hot minute. This one is actually my favorite. I don't think I've done it on a YouTube video before, but it's Rumi is like, you know, he's the love mystic, about living your life in this incredibly passionate, centered, connected way. You know, that's what I want. That's what appeals to me. So we're just gonna like, let's just see what happens. Also, it's my favorite artist too. Okay. The impossible made possible. All right, let's see. That's number 9. Love brings the sea into boiling and turns the mountains into a pebble. Love creates infinite openings in the dark sky and shudders the earth with its magnitude. We only limit what we believe to be possible by our lack of imagination. The divine has resources to all that is and all that is yet to be. Is there any limit to the resources of the heavens? No. So then why has not every impossible dream now been rendered possible, indeed manifest in shining glory upon the earth? The human heart knows everything envisioned can manifest according to divine timing and grace. Well, anyway. I like this for this particular video because it's so hard to, when we're really early on in the process, we're dealing with like the crisis stuff, and we're dealing with, you know, the processing, integration stages kind of right afterward. We're trying to figure out, you know, what happened to us, who we are, and wanting to be better, and, you know, looking at like the trauma that we've experienced and how it's changed us, and the resentment, the unfairness of that impact on us. And then we try to imagine like what the future would be like, you know, being a whole happy person. I know I used to look at others and they just seem so alien to me. I was like, I don't understand how they feel that way. How are they moving through the world? So unencumbered by pain. And then things come at you and you're like, this is fucking bullshit. And it is, instead of empowering, it's very triggering, you know? Like, oh, you can think differently. You can change your thoughts. You can feel differently. You're in charge of your experience in life. You're like, no, I'm fucking not. Like, all this shit happened to me. I wasn't fucking in charge of that. You know, and then somebody throws some Viktor Frankl at you, and you're like, this is no, like, I'm a human being, experience some normal human fucking emotions in response to some bullshit, you know, some trauma, some hurt, some abuse, some harm. But, as I said in other videos, all that stuff, like, if you're at a point where that stuff is like, that's, hearing it is hurting you, then that's not what you need to know right now. There comes a point later on, like you're moving in your healing process and you're kind of moving forward, when those are messages that are empowering to hear, when you're like, yes, I have control over me. I have control over what I think about myself. I have control over, you know, how I am, my emotional responses, whatever it is. You know, I get to choose to leave people or XYZ or whatever. And instead of feeling like a burden, hearing stuff like that feels like a blessing. You know, when you hear stuff early on about like loving yourself, being kind to yourself, that you are deserving, that you are, you know, not broken. And you're sitting there like, no, you don't understand. There's literally nothing good about me. There's nothing good about my life. You know, people are like, oh, but you're alive. And you're like, no, but I don't want to be. It's just like, but then you get further along And all that stuff that was triggering in the beginning is like, oh, you know, like, I am alive. That's amazing. I'm so happy for that. It's a miracle, because I didn't want to be in the past. Or, you know, I can find things to be grateful for. And like I do have, you know, whatever it is. All it means is when you're over here, those are the messages that you need to hear yet. Like, they're not going to hit you right yet. When you're over here, the stuff you need to hear is like unsafe people, unreliable narrators, abusers, unhealthy people. They're going to tell you things, and they're not going to be true. They may be lies. And we believe lies, as Ellie Modi Jr. said in one of his books. He said, we believe a lie because we're afraid it's true, or we hope it's true. And when you're over here, we're living in such fear and anxiety and fear and just loss, scarcity, pain. Just like there's so much. And it's hard to see our way out to a place where we're living from, you know, we're living in love, and we are love, and we are loving, and we are loved. And, you know, life is, you know, like a precious gift and shit. And you're like, no, it's not. Like, it's not a precious fucking gift. What are you saying to me? And over here, you move forward, and you're like, oh. And you look back on yourself. And I hope when we look back on ourselves, we are doing it with compassion. We're so many of us are so quick to be so compassionate to literally every fucking body else. And we don't turn that on ourselves. And we're so quick to be judgmental towards ourselves and critical and negative. And yet, when other people are doing stuff that we truly should be like, ooh, putting a critical eye toward, we're not doing it. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt. We should be giving us the benefit of the doubt. You know, compassion for us. Assuming good intentions for us. And going, oh, okay. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you got to be like, oh, that person's bad. Again, we don't need that good, bad paradigm. Right? We just need to be like, oh, is this something I want to connect with? Don't think so. We get real attached to specific people because we believe they represent a thing that we're going to have if we keep them in our lives. And that turns out to be a lie. And there's a freaking parallel for that in the spiritual community. Like, it's watching these other YouTubers. I was just sitting there like, oh, God, so it's true everywhere. We got to let go of people. What they represent to us, because it may not be true. Anyway, so you know, that card's coming from a real spiritual perspective of like, you know, manifest and like all that shit, which is fine. Like, that's important for somebody, you know, maybe even me. But the idea of the impossible becoming possible when you are early on in your healing process, the thing that seems impossible is that you will be healed, that you will be whole, that you will be loved and loved. And it is possible. And it's super hard to see that when you're in the middle of it. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wish it were just easy enough to be like, oh, here's the ways that you should think. You should think this way, and then suddenly things will be better, and you'll make better choices, and your life will be so much better. And that's not how it works. In emotional healing and physical healing, nobody can come in and heal us. A doctor doesn't come in and heal you. A doctor comes in and like tries to eliminate the shit that's interfering with your body's ability to heal itself and tries to support it in healing, you know, but we don't have stuff that heals. We heal. Our body heals. Our emotional self heals. It's something that happens that's internal. And it's kind of this process, this internal process for everybody, and you can't rush it. You just, you know, you take in the information you need to take in, and then one day it clicks. You shift your perception filter. You change out old paradigms, old ways of thinking that are not helpful, you know, and you've shifted towards new ways of thinking, and you're like, oh, if only I knew this back then. But like, it's the journey. We all go through it, and I'm so sorry. But just know the impossible. What feels impossible can be made possible. And do not feel like you have to do it overnight. Anyway, talk to you next time.